Welcome to the Lost in Disclosure. Chapter 1. The Ocean That Dreams in Darkness. Tonight, we drift into the dark water. Not the shallow blue of vacation postcards or the sunlit reefs where color dances in ribbons of light. No, we descend further, past the last glimmer of the sun, past the realm where divers venture and whales sing their ancient songs. We go to the place where pressure becomes a living force, where cold is absolute, and where silence wraps around you like a second skin. This is the deep ocean, and it is a world we barely know. More than 80% of our ocean remains unexplored, unmapped, unfilmed, untouched by human hands. We have sent rovers to Mars, captured images of distant galaxies billions of light years away, and split atoms to glimpse the architecture of reality itself. We have built telescopes that peer back to the birth of the universe and particle accelerators that recreate the first moments after the Big Bang. Yet the floor beneath our own seas remains as foreign to us as the surface of another planet. It is closer than the moon, more accessible than the peaks of distant mountains, yet infinitely more mysterious. Think about that for a moment. We have mapped nearly every inch of Mars with remote precision. We know the terrain of Venus despite its crushing atmosphere and acidic clouds. We have identified thousands of exoplanets orbiting distant stars. Yet here, on our own world, beneath the waves that cover 71% of the surface, vast regions remain completely unknown. No human has seen them. No camera has recorded them. They exist in a state of perpetual mystery, waiting in the cold and dark. The question has haunted explorers, scientists, and dreamers for generations. What waits for us in the deep dark? Some say nothing, that the abyss is empty, sterile, crushed into lifelessness by the sheer weight of the water above. They argue that life requires sunlight, warmth, and energy, resources that simply do not exist in the crushing depths. Others whisper of creatures beyond imagination, living fossils, bioluminescent hunters, organisms that defy every rule we thought governed life. Ancient things that have survived mass extinctions, ice ages, and the slow turning of continents. And still others wonder if something down there is not simply surviving, but watching. The ocean holds its secrets close. It does not give them freely. It is not like the land where ruins can be excavated and fossils can be brushed clean. The ocean dissolves, corrodes, and reclaims. It hides evidence beneath layers of sediment and salt. It guards its mysteries with pressure that can implode steel and darkness that swallows light itself. But every now and then, through the hum of sonar, the lens of a deep-sea camera, or the testimony of those who have descended into the black, something slips through. A sound that should not exist, a shape that defies classification, a flicker of movement where nothing should move. And we are left with the truth as old as the tides. The ocean dreams in darkness, and we do not know what it dreams of. In ancient times, sailors spoke of sea monsters with the reverence others reserved for gods. The kraken that could drag entire ships beneath the waves. The leviathan whose breath created whirlpools.
the sirens whose songs lured men to their doom. We dismiss these as myths, stories born from fear and imagination, tales told by exhausted sailors who had been at sea too long. But then we discovered the giant squid, a creature that can grow to 40 feet in length, with eyes the size of dinner plates and tentacles lined with serrated suckers. We found the oarfish, a serpentine creature that can reach 50 feet and rises from the deep only when dying or disturbed. We encountered the goblin shark, the frilled shark, the barrel-eye fish with its transparent head and tubular eyes that rotate to track prey above. The monsters were real. We simply hadn't looked deep enough to find them. And if these creatures exist, creatures that seem pulled from nightmares and fever dreams, what else might lurk in the regions we have never explored? What other impossible things might call the abyss their home? The ocean is patient. It does not rush to reveal itself. It waits, vast and indifferent, while we build our machines and test our courage. And then, when we finally descend, when we pierce the veil of darkness with our fragile lights and cameras, it allows us a glimpse. Just a glimpse. Never the whole truth. Because the ocean knows something we are only beginning to understand. Some mysteries are not meant to be solved. Some doors are not meant to be opened. Some depths are not meant to be reached. But still, we try. We are explorers by nature, driven by curiosity and the need to know. We cannot see a dark place without wanting to illuminate it. We cannot encounter a locked door without trying to find the key. It is what makes us human. It is what sent us across uncharted seas, over frozen mountains, and eventually into space itself. And now, it calls us downward, into the cold, into the pressure, into the darkness that has existed since the dawn of time, undisturbed and infinite. The ocean dreams, and perhaps in descending, we're stepping into that dream. Uninvited guests in a world that was never meant for us. But the story doesn't end there.
Chapter 2. The Abyssal Silence. The Mariana Trench lies in the western Pacific Ocean, a crescent-shaped scar carved into the ocean floor by the collision of tectonic plates. It is the deepest point on Earth, a chasm so profound that if you placed Mount Everest inside it, the peak would still rest more than a mile beneath the surface. At its lowest point, known as Challenger Deep, the ocean floor sits nearly 7 miles down. 7 miles. 36,000 feet of water pressing down with a force of over 15,000 pounds per square inch. To put that in perspective, it is the equivalent of 50 jumbo jets stacked on top of a single human body. It is 3 Toyota Camrys balanced on your thumbnail. It is pressure so immense that steel warps, reinforced glass shatters like sugar, and titanium groans under the strain. Even the most advanced submersibles, machines designed specifically for deep-sea exploration, creak and groan with every meter of descent, their hulls tested to the very edge of collapse. The temperature hovers just above freezing, rarely rising above 2 degrees Celsius. In some regions near hydrothermal vents, it can spike to boiling, but in the open abyss, the cold is absolute. It seeps through insulated walls. It numbs extremities even inside heated cabins. It is the cold of space, of the void, of places where warmth is a distant memory. No sunlight penetrates this far. Not a single photon makes the journey from surface to floor. Photosynthesis, the foundation of nearly all life on Earth, the process that powers forests and grasslands and coral reefs, cannot exist here. There is no food chain rooted in the sun, no plants, no algae, nothing green or growing in the way we understand. And yet, the trench is not dead. In 1960, two men descended into Challenger Deep aboard the bathyscaphe Trieste. Jacques Piccard, a Swiss oceanographer, and Don Walsh, a U.S. Navy lieutenant, became the first human beings to touch the bottom of the world. The descent took nearly 5 hours. The sphere they rode in was barely large enough for two people, with walls 7 inches thick and a single small window made of acrylic resin. They sat in near silence as the pressure mounted, as the light faded, as the world above became a distant dream. When they finally reached the bottom, they switched on their exterior lights and peered through the window. What they saw defied every expectation. A flatfish, pale, ghostly, resting on the sediment, and near it, shrimp-like creatures moving across the ocean floor with slow, deliberate grace. Life, impossibly, in a place where life should not be. They remained on the bottom for only 20 minutes. A crack had formed in one of the outer windows during descent, and they knew that staying too long risked catastrophe. But in those 20 minutes, they shattered a fundamental assumption, that the deep ocean was a barren wasteland empty of nothing but cold water and crushing darkness. Decades later, filmmaker and explorer James Cameron made a solo dive to the same depth aboard the Deep-Sea Challenger. It was 2012, 52 years after Piccard and Walsh. Cameron is known for pushing boundaries. His films explore the extremes of imagination, but his true passion has always been the ocean. He designed the submersible himself, a vertical torpedo of technology and ambition, capable of withstanding pressures that would obliterate a nuclear submarine. He described the experience as lunar desolate, a barren expanse of pale sediment stretching into the black, featureless and alien. The landscape, he said, looked like another world, not Earth, but some cold moon orbiting a distant planet. No forests of kelp, no coral structures, just emptiness. But his cameras told a different story. They captured microbial mats, colonies of bacteria clinging to the sediment, forming thin layers of life where no life should survive. Translucent amphipods, tiny crustaceans no larger than a fingernail, scuttling across the rocks. Creatures with no eyes, because in a world without light, sight becomes not just not necessary, but metabolically expensive. Evolution strips away what is not needed, and in the abyss, eyes are a luxury. The abyss is silent, profoundly, utterly silent. Sound travels differently underwater, faster, farther, but in the deep there is nothing to make sound. No wind, no rain, no rustling leaves or chirping insects, just the occasional creak of shifting rock, the distant rumble of a tectonic plate settling, and the low hum of a submersible's machinery. A sound so alien to this place that it must seem to the creatures below like the voice of a god. But the silence is not empty. Scientists deploying hydrophones, underwater microphones designed to capture sound across vast distances, have picked up something else. Low-frequency pulses that ripple through the water like the heartbeat of something enormous. Some are steady, rhythmic, almost mechanical in their precision. Others are erratic, organic, alive. The ocean speaks, but we do not yet understand its language.
In the 1950s, the U.S. Navy established a network of underwater listening stations called SOSUS, Sound Surveillance System, designed to track Soviet submarines during the Cold War. The hydrophones were placed strategically along the ocean floor, capable of detecting the faint hum of a submarine's engine from thousands of miles away, but they picked up more than submarines. They recorded whale songs, of course, the haunting melodies of humpbacks, the clicks of sperm whales, the eerie calls of belugas. But they also recorded sounds that did not fit any known profile. Sounds that were too loud, too low, too strange to classify. Sounds from the abyss. One of the most famous is a noise dubbed the bloop, but there are others, dozens of others. Some have been explained, some remain mysteries, and some the Navy will not discuss at all. Because if the trench is not empty, if it is in fact alive with creatures we have never seen, then the question becomes, what are they? Where did they come from? And have they always been there, waiting in the dark? Or are they something new? Something that arrived? The pressure at these depths is not just a physical barrier, it is a fortress. A wall that separates our world from another, and only recently, with the advent of advanced robotics and deep-sea technology, have we been able to breach it. But perhaps some walls exist for a reason. Years later, another mystery would echo the same pattern.
Chapter 3. Voices from Below. In 1997, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration recorded a sound unlike anything heard before. It was detected by hydrophones stationed more than 3,000 miles apart, a network designed to monitor seismic activity and track the movements of whales across the Pacific. The array was sensitive enough to pick up underwater earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and the low-frequency calls of blue whales, the largest animals ever to exist on Earth. But this sound was different. It was loud, incredibly loud, loud enough to be heard across an entire ocean basin. It rose in frequency over the course of about 1 minute, a deep, resonant rumble that seemed to swell from the depths, peak, and then fade back into silence. The waveform, when analyzed, resembled that of a living creature, similar in structure to the calls of baleen whales, but far, far larger in scale. They called it the bloop. If the sound was biological, if it truly came from a living animal, then the creature that made it would have been several times the size of a blue whale. Not just slightly bigger, exponentially bigger, a leviathan of unimaginable proportions, dwarfing anything in the fossil record, lurking somewhere in the deep where humans have never ventured. The implications were staggering. Marine biologists knew that the ocean still held undiscovered species. Every deep-sea expedition brought back footage of creatures never before seen: translucent jellyfish, bioluminescent fish, squid with limbs that twisted in impossible ways. But these were small. Strange, yes, but within the bounds of known biology. A creature capable of producing the bloop would be something else entirely. It would be a titan, a myth made real. Speculation exploded across scientific communities and into popular culture. Was this evidence of a surviving prehistoric creature? A descendant of the ancient marine reptiles that ruled the oceans millions of years ago? Or something that had evolved in isolation, hidden in the deepest trenches, growing to sizes we could scarcely imagine? Some pointed to legends: the kraken, the leviathan, the sea serpents depicted in medieval maps with the warning, "Here be dragons." What if those stories were not fiction,
but faded memories of real encounters. What if in the days before sonar and submarines, something massive occasionally surfaced, was glimpsed by terrified sailors, and then vanished back into the deep? But scientists, as always, sought evidence, and evidence in this case pointed elsewhere. After years of analysis, NOAA concluded that the bloop was most likely the sound of an icequake, a massive iceberg fracturing and calving off the Antarctic ice shelf. As the ice cracks, it releases enormous amounts of energy, producing sounds that can travel thousands of miles underwater. The acoustic profile matched, the location matched, the frequency, amplitude, and duration all fit within expected parameters for a large-scale ice fracture event. It was not a creature. It was ice. Cold, lifeless, mundane ice. The mystery, it seemed, was solved. And yet, there are other sounds. In 1991, hydrophones in the Pacific began detecting a noise that researchers dubbed upsweep. It is a continuous rising tone that repeats seasonally, peaking in the spring and fall. It consists of a series of narrow-band upsweeping sounds, each lasting several seconds, occurring in long trains. The sound has been recorded for decades, and its source remains unidentified. Some scientists believe it is volcanic activity, the movement of magma beneath the ocean floor, the grinding of tectonic plates, the release of gas from underwater vents. But the sound's regularity, its seasonal variation, is not fit standard volcanic patterns. Volcanoes do not keep schedules. They do not pulse in predictable cycles. So the sound continues, year after year, rising from the deep, and no one knows why. Then there is Julia, recorded in 1999. Julia was a sound that lasted for about 15 seconds. It was loud enough to be detected by the entire Equatorial Pacific Autonomous Hydrophone Array. The profile suggested something under immense strain, a long, low groan, like metal bending or a massive structure collapsing under pressure. NOAA suggested it might be an iceberg running aground on the seafloor near Antarctica. Plausible, reasonable, but the sound's characteristics were unusual. It didn't quite match other ice-related sounds, and its location, far from major ice shelves, raised questions. What was Julia? A geological event? A biological anomaly? Or something else entirely? And then there is slowdown. Recorded over several years, slowdown is a long, descending wail that lasts up to 7 minutes. It sounds mournful, almost sorrowful, like the dying breath of something immense. Researchers suggest it is the sound of an iceberg dragging across the ocean floor, slowly grinding to a halt as it melts and breaks apart. But there is something haunting about slowdown. Something that feels less like geology and more like a voice. A call from the deep, asking a question we cannot answer. Not all sounds, however, fit neat explanations. There are the metallic echoes, sharp, percussive, almost industrial. These do not fit the profile of marine mammals or geological activity. They sound manufactured, as if someone, or something, is striking metal against metal in the deep. Some hydrophone recordings have captured rhythmic knocking, deliberate, patterned, almost like Morse code tapped against steel. The knocks come in sequences, pause, then resume. They do not match the sounds of any known marine animal. Whales and dolphins produce clicks, whistles, and songs. Fish grunt and croak, but none of them produce rhythmic metallic knocking. Others have picked up low hums that pulse at regular intervals, almost like sonar pings. But they are not sonar. Sonar is active. It is sent out, bounces off objects, and returns. These hums are passive. They simply exist, pulsing through the water at steady intervals, as if something down there is listening, probing, mapping the darkness. The ocean is full of voices, but not all of them can be explained. Skeptics point to human activity: submarines, shipping traffic, underwater construction, oil drilling, and they are not wrong. The ocean is noisy now, cluttered with the mechanical sounds of our civilization. Container ships rumble across trade routes, naval vessels patrol with active sonar, drilling rigs hammer into the seafloor. The ocean, once a realm of natural sound, is now filled with the hum of industry. But some recordings were made in regions far from shipping lanes, far from any known human presence. In places where the only company should be the deep, in places where no ship has reason to go, where no submarine patrols, where no oil platform stands. And still, the sounds persist. So the question lingers: what calls from the abyss? Is it geological? The slow grinding of the Earth's crust, the movement of magma, the fracturing of rock under imaginable pressure? Is it biological? Creatures we have never seen communicating in frequencies we barely understand? Or is it something else, entirely? And perhaps more unsettling, is it calling to us, or to something else? Because if intelligence exists in the deep, it would not communicate the way we do. It would not use language or radio waves or light. It would use sound, low-frequency sound that travels for thousands of miles, passing through water as easily as air. And if something down there is intelligent, if it has been listening to our sonar, our ships, our submarines for decades, then perhaps it is trying to respond. Not in words, not in signals we can easily decode, but in rhythms, in patterns, in voices from below. Across the world, the mystery deepened.
Chapter 4: The Unseen Architects. In 2003, a remotely operated vehicle exploring the Galapagos Rift captured footage of something that made scientists pause. Circular formations, dozens of them, perfectly round, arranged in geometric patterns across the ocean floor, each one several feet in diameter. They were not natural depressions formed by currents or the random settling of sediment. They were carved, etched into the sand with deliberate precision, as if drawn by an unseen hand. At first, researchers assumed they were the work of underwater currents, water moving in predictable ways, swirling in eddies and vortexes, slowly sculpting the seafloor over time. After all, nature is capable of producing patterns. Ripples form in sand dunes. Hexagonal columns of basalt emerge from cooling lava. Snowflakes grow in intricate symmetry. The universe, at its core, is mathematical. But currents are chaotic. They do not produce perfect circles. They do not arrange those circles in grids. They meander, shift, and change with the tides, the seasons, and the pull of the moon. These formations were too clean, too intentional, too consistent. Then a hypothesis emerged. In the waters near Japan, marine biologists had discovered something remarkable. Male white-spotted pufferfish creating elaborate structures on the seafloor to attract mates. The fish, no longer than a few inches, spent days carving intricate mandalas in the sand, radial patterns with ridges, valleys, and perfectly symmetrical designs. They used their fins to sculpt, working tirelessly to create beauty for a purpose as old as life itself.
reproduction. The structures served no functional purpose beyond aesthetics. They did not provide shelter. They did not help in hunting or hiding. They were art, pure and simple. Art rendered in sediment and instinct. Could the formations near the Galapagos be the same? The work of an unknown species carving patterns to communicate, to attract, to claim territory? Possibly, but no creature has been observed making them. No pufferfish reside in that region. And the patterns, some scientists noted, are too large for any known fish. The circles span several feet, some nearly 10 feet across. A small fish creating such a structure would be like a human carving Mount Rushmore with a spoon. Not impossible, but improbable. Still, the ocean floor is littered with mysteries that have since been explained. Structures that once seemed impossibly geometric are now understood as natural formations. The Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland, thousands of hexagonal basalt columns rising from the sea, was once thought to be the work of ancient giants. We now know it formed from volcanic activity, as cooling lava contracted and fractured into uniform shapes. The Bimini Road in the Bahamas, a series of rectangular limestone blocks arranged in straight lines beneath the water, was once believed to be the remnants of Atlantis. Geologists now explain it as beach rock, a natural formation created by the cementation of shell fragments in sand. Stone spheres found off the coast of New Zealand, perfectly round and smooth, were speculated to be ancient artifacts or even eggs of giant sea creatures. They are concretions, minerals that crystallized around organic matter over millions of years, forming spheres through natural chemical processes. Nature is a sculptor. It builds with patience and precision. Not everything strange is inexplicable. But then there are the trails. Long, continuous grooves carved in the seabed, stretching for miles. Some are linear, running in straight lines as if following a course. Others curve in spirals, looping back on themselves. A few intersect, forming grids that look disturbingly deliberate. They do not match the movement patterns of known bottom dwellers. They do not correspond to currents or tectonic shifts. One theory suggests they are feeding trails, the tracks left by organisms slowly grazing across the ocean floor, consuming bacteria, detritus, and organic matter. Sea cucumbers and certain species of starfish are known to leave trails as they move. But these trails are random, meandering, dictated by the search for food. The grooves found in the deep are different. They are methodical, almost planned. If they are feeding trails, then the creatures responsible are doing so with remarkable consistency. They are following patterns, covering ground systematically as if surveying the area rather than simply feeding. Another theory is more unsettling, that these are not trails at all, but furrows, made by something dragging across the seabed, something heavy, something that moves with purpose. But what could be that heavy, and why would it drag itself across the seabed? Some researchers propose that they are the marks left by objects tumbling down underwater slopes, rocks, debris, or even shipwrecks sliding down inclines and carving grooves as they go. But the trails do not follow gravitational paths. They do not run downhill. Some run horizontally, Some run uphill, and some change direction mid-course, as if whatever made them decided to turn. Objects do not decide. They fall. They roll. They obey physics. But something made those trails, and whatever it was, it moved with intention. The tone remains calm. The footage remains grainy, captured by cameras designed for function, not artistry. The lights of the ROV illuminate only a small circle of the sea floor, a spotlight in an infinite theater. Beyond that circle, the darkness presses in, absolute and impenetrable. And in that darkness, the patterns continue. The circles, the trails, the grooves. Some have been explained. Some remain mysteries. And some, perhaps, are not meant to be understood. Because the ocean floor is not a static place. It is alive in its own slow way. It shifts. It grows. It erodes. And within that slow dance of geology and biology, patterns emerge. Some are natural, some are biological, and some exist in the space between. Deep down in the cold black silence, something continues to carve, not with tools, not with machines, but with patience, with time, with a purpose we cannot yet fathom. The ocean does not rush. It does not explain. It simply waits for us to look deeper, to ask better questions, to understand that the mystery is not always in finding the answer. Sometimes the mystery is in realizing how much we do not know. And yet, even that realization leaves a shadow of doubt.
Chapter 5. Visitors Beneath the Veil. In 1968, the USS Scorpion, a nuclear-powered submarine, vanished in the Atlantic Ocean with all 99 crew members aboard. The official investigation concluded that the loss was due to mechanical failure, a catastrophic malfunction that caused the submarine to sink rapidly, imploding under pressure before anyone could react. The wreckage was found months later, broken in two, resting on the ocean floor nearly 2 miles down. But sailors who served on other vessels in the area, both before and after the incident, reported something else. Something they were told not to discuss. Something that, even decades later, they speak of only in hushed tones. They spoke of lights beneath the water. Bright, fast-moving, metallic, objects that pace their ships for hours, matching speed and depth with uncanny precision, then vanishing without a trace. Objects that appeared on sonar as solid contacts, only to disappear moments later, leaving no wreckage, no debris, no explanation. The Navy has a term for these encounters: unidentified submerged objects, USOs. Like their aerial counterparts, UFOs, now rebranded as UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, USOs appear on instruments, evade pursuit, and defy conventional explanation. But unlike objects in the sky, these move through a medium that should make high-speed travel nearly impossible.
Water is 800 times denser than air. Moving through it at high speed requires enormous energy. Any object traveling quickly underwater should generate massive turbulence, cavitation bubbles, and heat. It should be loud, leaving a wake that can be detected for miles. Submarines, even the most advanced nuclear-powered models, move slowly and carefully, their hulls designed to minimize noise and resistance. And yet, according to declassified reports and crew testimonies, these objects move silently, effortlessly, at speeds that should be impossible, as if the ocean does not resist them, as if they exist outside the rules of physics that govern everything else. In 2004, Navy pilots aboard the USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group encountered aerial objects off the coast of Southern California during routine training exercises. The incident, now famous, involved tic-tac-shaped objects that demonstrated flight capabilities far beyond any known aircraft. They accelerated instantaneously, moved at hypersonic speeds, and defied inertia in ways that should have torn them apart. But the encounter did not end in the sky. Radar operators aboard the USS Princeton tracked the objects descending from high altitude and plunging into the ocean. They did not slow. They did not impact. They simply continued moving underwater, disappearing from sensors as if they had passed through the surface without resistance. Commander David Fravor, one of the pilots who witnessed the objects, later described seeing a disturbance in the water below. Something large submerged, creating a cross-shaped roiling pattern on the surface. As his aircraft approached, the disturbance vanished, and the tic-tac object ascended to meet him. Whatever it was, it operated in both air and water, seamlessly, without transition. Some researchers believe these are advanced human technologies, classified submarines or drones being tested in secret by the U.S. military or a foreign power. Black budget programs that push the boundaries of propulsion, stealth, and material science. Technologies decades ahead of what is publicly known, hidden behind layers of clearance and compartmentalization. It is a reasonable hypothesis. Militaries have always tested experimental technology in remote locations, away from prying eyes. The SR-71 Blackbird, the F-117 Nighthawk, and the B-2 Spirit were all considered impossible until they were revealed. Perhaps USOs are simply the next generation of classified craft. But the reports go back too far. Accounts of strange underwater objects date back to the 1940s. World War II sailors reported ghost rockets and luminous spheres that followed their ships through hostile waters. Submarine crews in the Cold War era described objects that outmaneuvered them, diving to depths no human-made vessel could survive. Fishermen in the North Atlantic told stories of glowing discs rising from the sea and ascending into the night sky. If these are human technologies, they have existed for over 80 years, advancing at a rate that seems implausible. And they've been deployed by multiple nations across multiple oceans without ever being officially acknowledged. Or they are something else entirely. In the 1980s, a Soviet submarine crew operating in the North Atlantic filed a report that was classified for decades. They described being followed by 6 disc-shaped objects while on patrol. The objects were detected on sonar, tracked visually through periscopes, and confirmed by multiple crew members. They surrounded the submarine, matching its course and speed for several minutes before suddenly accelerating and shooting upward at a velocity the sonar operator described as physically impossible. When the crew surfaced and reported the encounter to their superiors, they were debriefed extensively and ordered to remain silent. The incident was buried in classified files and only came to light years later after the fall of the Soviet Union, when some military records were declassified or leaked. The crew members insisted they were not mistaken. They were trained, experienced sailors who understood sonar, radar, and underwater acoustics. What they encountered was real, and it was not human. Are these the works of another nation? A secret alliance testing technologies in international waters? Perhaps, but if so, they represent a level of advancement that challenges everything we understand about physics, engineering, and propulsion. Or are they something else entirely? Observers, visitors, inhabitants of the deep who have always been there, long before we ever ventured down to meet them. The ocean does not answer. It only watches and waits. From the depth below to the silence above, the question remains.
Chapter 6: The Biology of the Impossible. Life, as we once understood it, required three fundamental things: sunlight, moderate temperatures, and oxygen. These were the pillars of biology, the non-negotiable conditions for existence. Life began in the sun-warmed shallows where photosynthesis could occur. It spread across the land, carried by organisms that breathed oxygen and basked in the light of day. Ecosystems were built on a foundation of energy flowing from the sun, through plants, through herbivores, through predators. Everything traced back to the light. And then, in 1977, scientists exploring the Galapagos Rift discovered something that shattered those assumptions. They found hydrothermal vents, cracks in the ocean floor where superheated water, rich in minerals and chemicals, pours out into the freezing abyss. The water temperature at the vent openings can exceed 700 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt lead. The environment is toxic, acidic, and completely devoid of light. The pressure is crushing. The darkness is absolute. It should be sterile, a graveyard of stone and heat and poison. Instead, they found ecosystems. Giant tube worms, some growing over 8 feet long, cluster around the vents in dense colonies. They are pale, ghostly, and utterly alien. They have no mouths, no stomachs, no digestive systems. They do not eat in any conventional sense. Instead, they host colonies of bacteria inside their bodies, symbiotic organisms that live within specialized organs called trophosome. These bacteria perform chemosynthesis, converting the hydrogen sulfide and other chemicals pouring from the vents into energy. The tube worms absorb this energy, using it to grow, reproduce, and thrive in an environment that should be lethal. It is a form of life that does not rely on the sun. It is powered by the Earth itself, by the heat and chemistry of the planet's interior. It is life that exists outside the rules we thought biology governed. And the tube worms are not alone.
There are bone-white crabs with no eyes scuttling across the rocks in search of bacterial mats to graze upon. Blind shrimp that congregate by the thousands near the vents, their bodies adapted to sense heat through specialized organs on their backs. They cannot see, but they can feel the warmth, navigating by temperature gradients in a world where vision is useless. There are fish that live in water hot enough to cook them, Pompeii worms that thrive in temperatures exceeding 170 degrees Fahrenheit, their bodies coated in bacteria that act as insulation. Yeti crabs that farm bacteria on their claws, waving them in the vent flow to cultivate food. These creatures are called extremophiles, organisms that thrive in conditions once thought incompatible with life, and their existence has profound implications. If life can flourish in the crushing darkness of the ocean floor, sustained by chemicals rather than sunlight, then life could exist in places we once thought barren.
On Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, beneath a frozen crust of ice, there is a liquid ocean kept warm by tidal forces generated by Jupiter's immense gravity. No sunlight reaches that ocean. It has been dark for billions of years. But if hydrothermal vents exist there, and many scientists believe they do, then Europa's ocean could host life. Alien life, evolved in isolation, thriving in the dark just as tube worms thrive on Earth. On Enceladus, a moon of Saturn, geysers of water vapor erupt from cracks in the ice, shooting hundreds of miles into space. Analysis of that vapor shows the presence of organic molecules, salts, and hydrogen, the chemical signatures of hydrothermal activity. Beneath the ice, there is an ocean, and in that ocean, there could be life. Even on distant exoplanets, worlds that orbit far from their stars, where no sunlight warms the surface, there could be subsurface oceans heated by geothermal energy. Rogue planets drifting through interstellar space with no star at all could still harbor life deep within, powered by the heat of their own cores. The definition of life, it turns out, is far more flexible than we imagined. But extremophiles also raise another question. If evolution can produce organisms capable of surviving in the most hostile environments on Earth, what else might it produce? What forms of intelligence, awareness, or consciousness could emerge in the deep? We assume intelligence requires brains like ours, complex, energy-intensive, dependent on oxygen and warmth. We assume it requires senses like ours, vision, hearing, touch. We assume it requires communication like ours, language, symbols, abstract thought. But the ocean is filled with creatures that sense, communicate, and navigate in ways we barely understand. Octopuses, as mentioned, possess a form of intelligence that is entirely alien to us. Their neurons are distributed throughout their arms, allowing each limb to act semi-independently. An octopus can solve a puzzle with one arm while another arm explores a different task. It is a decentralized intelligence, more like a network than a single mind. They communicate through color and texture, changing their skin in intricate patterns to convey mood, intent, and information. They use tools, carrying coconut shells to use as shelters, wielding rocks to crack open clams. And they do all this with a lifespan of only a few years. Imagine what an octopus could achieve if it lived as long as a human, if it had time to accumulate knowledge, pass it to offspring, build a culture.
Whales sing songs that travel for thousands of miles, their low-frequency calls echoing through the ocean like radio waves. Sperm whales use codas, sequences of clicks that vary by region and pod, much like human languages vary by country and culture. They name each other, using individualized click patterns to identify specific whales. They teach their young. They mourn their dead. Are they intelligent? By human standards, perhaps not. But by their own standards, absolutely. Intelligence does not have to look like us. It does not have to build machines or write books. It simply has to solve problems, adapt to environments, and navigate the complexities of existence. And in the deep, where survival requires adaptations we can barely imagine, intelligence might take forms we have never considered. Perhaps there are creatures in the abyss that communicate through bioluminescence, flashing patterns of light too complex for us to interpret. Perhaps there are organisms that sense the Earth's magnetic field, navigating with a precision that puts our GPS systems to shame. Perhaps there are colonies that function as single minds, like ants or bees, but on a scale so vast we mistake them for geological formations. Perhaps intelligence does not require a brain at all. Perhaps it is emergent, distributed, collective, a network of simple organisms acting in concert, producing behavior that seems intelligent even though no single individual possesses awareness. Or perhaps deep in the trench, there is something that does possess awareness, something old, something patient, something that has watched us descend, studied our machines, listened to our sonar, and decided, not yet, not yet. The ocean is vast, and within that vastness, life has found a way, not just to survive, but to thrive, not just to exist, but to adapt, to evolve, to become something more. And perhaps one day we will descend far enough to meet it. But if the ocean hides secrets, then the question becomes, are we ready for the answers?
Chapter 7. The Abyss Stares Back. There is a concept in quantum physics known as the observer effect. It suggests that the act of observation changes that which is being observed. At the quantum level, particles exist in a state of probability, a wave function that represents all possible states at once. But when we measure them, when we observe them, the wave function collapses and the particle assumes a definite state. The very act of looking changes reality. In psychology, the observer effect manifests differently, but with similar consequences. People behave differently when they know they are being watched. A worker under supervision performs differently than one left alone. A child observed by a parent acts differently than one at play with friends. The presence of an observer alters behavior, sometimes subtly, sometimes dramatically. And in the deep ocean, where light and sound are rare and precious, the arrival of a submersible, with its bright floodlights and humming machinery, is an event, an intrusion. We like to think of exploration as a passive act. We descend, we observe, we document. We believe we are merely witnesses recording the natural world as it exists. But the ocean is not a museum. It is a living system, and when we enter it, we change it. The creatures that live in the abyss have evolved in total darkness. For millions of years, light has been a foreign concept. Bioluminescence exists,
flashes of blue-green light produced by chemical reactions used for communication, hunting, or defense. But it is brief, controlled, and rare. Then suddenly, a blinding beam pierces the black. Floodlights from a submersible illuminate the seafloor, turning night into artificial day. Cameras flash, sonar pings echo through the water like thunder. The silence, which has existed for eons, is shattered. What do they make of us? Do they perceive us as intruders, predators, or something so alien they cannot categorize us at all? A deep-sea fish, blind and adapted to a world without light, suddenly bathed in brightness, what does it feel? Terror? Confusion? Or nothing at all? Its senses so attuned to darkness that light is simply incomprehensible. And if there is intelligence in the deep, if something down there is aware, conscious, observing, what does it think of us? Humanity has always searched for mirrors of itself. We look to the stars and wonder if anyone is looking back. We scan the cosmos for radio signals, for signs of technology, for evidence that we are not alone in the universe. We build monuments, send messages into space, and yearn for contact. But perhaps the search for intelligence is at its core a search for validation, a need to know that we matter, that consciousness, awareness, thought, these things we prize above all else, are not unique to us, that somewhere in the vastness of space or the depths of the ocean, there is another mind, another perspective, another way of seeing the universe. We want to be recognized, acknowledged, understood. But the abyss does not care about that need. It exists in its own time, by its own rules. It has been here for hundreds of millions of years. It will be here long after we are gone. The creatures that inhabit it have survived mass extinctions, ice ages, and the slow churning of tectonic plates. They do not need us. They do not wonder about us. They simply exist as they have always existed, in the cold and the darkness. And perhaps that is the true mystery. Not whether something lives in the abyss. We know it does. But whether it acknowledges us at all. Whether it sees us as explorers or simply as ghosts passing through temporary disturbances in a world that does not need us. The abyss does not stare back because it hates us. It stares back because it is indifferent. And maybe that is more unsettling than any monster we could imagine. Because monsters at least care. They hunt, they attack, they respond. Monsters are engaged with the world, driven by hunger or aggression or survival. They are predictable, understandable. But indifference? Indifference is cold. It is the realization that the universe does not revolve around us, that our presence, our machines, our lights and sounds and cameras, they are nothing. A brief flicker in the dark, a ripple on the surface of an ocean that stretches deeper than we can fathom. We descend into the abyss seeking answers, seeking discovery, seeking proof that we are not alone, that the universe is filled with life and wonder and meaning. But the abyss offers no such comfort. It simply exists, silent, patient, eternal. And in its silence, there was a question, not spoken, but felt. A question that echoes in the mind of every explorer who has descended into the deep and returned changed. The question is this: are we seeking the abyss, or is it seeking us? Are we the observers, or the observed? We shine our lights into the darkness, believing we are illuminating the unknown. But perhaps, from the perspective of the deep, We are the unknown. We are the mystery, the strange, fragile creatures in metal shells invading a world we do not understand. And perhaps the reason the abyss stares back is not to challenge us, or to welcome us, or to warn us. Perhaps it stares back simply to remember. To remember that the ocean was here first, that the darkness is the natural state, and that light, warmth, and life as we know it, these are the anomalies, the exceptions, the brief flickering moments in an otherwise infinite cold. We are visitors in the abyss, and visitors, no matter how long they stay, always leave. The ocean remains. The darkness remains. The silence remains. And whatever waits in the deep, whether creature, phenomenon, or presence, it remains as well, unmoved, unchanging, eternal. Some call it patience, others call it indifference. But perhaps it is something else entirely. Perhaps it is simply the nature of the deep to exist without need, without want, without the restless curiosity that drives humanity forward. The abyss does not seek answers. It is the answer. And that answer is this: you do not belong here. Not as a threat, not as a warning, simply as a fact. The deep is not ours. It never was. And no matter how far we descend, no matter how much we explore, we will always be outsiders. But that will not stop us, because humanity does not accept boundaries. We push, we probe, we venture into places we were not meant to go, driven by a need to know that borders on obsession. And so we will continue to descend, to build better machines, to dive deeper, to shine our lights into the darkness and ask again and again the same question: what is down there? And one day, perhaps, the abyss will answer. Not with words, not with signals, but with presence. And we will finally understand what it means to be seen by something that has been watching all along. Beneath the final light, the truth waits.
Chapter 8. Beneath the Final Light. Imagine the descent one more time. You are sealed inside a sphere of titanium and reinforced glass, suspended in the water column by a tether so thin it seems impossible that it could hold you. The surface is miles above. The seafloor is miles below. You hang in the void, drifting through layers of water that shift in temperature, density, and darkness. The sunlight fades, first to blue, then to deep indigo, then to black. You pass the epipelagic zone, the sunlit surface waters where most marine life thrives. You descend through the mesopelagic, the twilight zone, where the last traces of light struggle to penetrate. Bioluminescent creatures drift past your window. Jellyfish pulsing with faint blue light. Fish with glowing lures dangling from their foreheads. Squid that flash patterns across their skin like living fireworks. Then you enter the bathypelagic, the midnight zone. Here there is no light from above. None. The only illumination comes from the creatures themselves, and even that is rare. The water presses against the hull of your submersible, a constant, unyielding force. You can hear it creaking, groaning, adjusting to the pressure. The engineers assured you it would hold, but down here, in the dark, doubt creeps in. You continue. The abyssopelagic zone.
The abyss. The pressure is now over 5,000 pounds per square inch. Your submersible's lights cut through the water, illuminating particles suspended in the void. Marine snow, they call it. Tiny flakes of organic matter drifting downward, the detritus of life from above. It falls in slow motion, like a snow globe turned upside down. You see movement. A gulper eel, its mouth grotesquely large, drifting through the darkness. A vampire squid, cloaked in webbing, its eyes enormous and reflective. They do not flee from your light. They do not approach. They simply exist, moving through the water with a grace that seems impossible given the pressure, the cold, the absolute emptiness of this place. And then, finally, you reach the bottom, the Hadal zone, the deepest layer, named after Hades, the Greek underworld, the realm of the dead. The lights of your submersible illuminate a stretch of pale sediment. It is flat, featureless, lunar. The kind of landscape that makes you feel small, insignificant, a mote of dust in an infinite expanse. And then you see it. A trail carved into the sand, fresh, as if something passed by only moments ago. You follow it with your lights. It curves, spirals, and disappears into the darkness beyond your reach. The trail is clean, deliberate, etched with a precision that suggests intention. Not the random wandering of a scavenger, but the purposeful movement of something with a destination. You wait. The instruments hum. The cameras record. The oxygen supply ticks down second by second. Nothing moves. But you know, deep in your gut, in the oldest part of your brain, the part that still remembers when humans were prey, that you are not alone. Minutes pass, hours maybe. Time loses meaning down here. There are no rhythms of day and night, no tides to mark the passage of time. Just the steady hum of your life support system and the faint creak of the hull adjusting to the pressure. And then just at the edge of your vision, something shifts. Not a creature, not a rock, not a trick of the light. Just a presence. You cannot describe it. It is not physical, it is not audible, but you feel it. The way you feel eyes on the back of your neck, the way you sense a presence in a dark room, even when you cannot see it. It is awareness, attention, recognition. Something in the darkness has noticed you. You do not see eyes, you do not hear a sound, but the feeling is unmistakable. You have been seen. And then, as suddenly as it arrived, it is gone. The feeling lifts, the presence fades. The darkness returns to being just darkness, empty, cold, indifferent. But you know what you felt, and you know with absolute certainty that you were not imagining it. You ascend. The pressure eases, the water lightens, the temperature rises. You pass back through the zones, back through the layers of life, back toward the surface, where the sun still shines and the air is warm.
You surface, breathe the open air, feel the wind on your face, and try to explain what you experienced. But words fail, because what you felt was not sight or sound or touch. It was recognition. The abyss is alive in ways we have yet to understand,
Not with cities or ships or technology, not with language or art or history, but with something older, something patient, something that exists in the spaces between biology and geology, between life and environment, between consciousness and instinct. It is not waiting for us. It is simply waiting, as it has waited for millions of years, as it will wait for millions more. And whether it is curious, indifferent, or simply present, we do not know. Some mysteries prefer the dark, and the ocean, vast and ancient, hosts more than we will ever uncover. But we continue to search, because that is what we do. We descend, we listen, we wonder. We push against the boundaries of the known, driven by a need to understand that is as fundamental to us as breathing. We build better machines. We dive deeper. We ask better questions. And one day, perhaps, we will find the answers. Or perhaps the answers will find us. Because the ocean is not passive. It is not a museum frozen in time, waiting for us to catalog its contents. It is alive, dynamic, changing, evolving. And in the deepest parts, where pressure and darkness create a world unlike any other on Earth, evolution has had millions of years to work, millions of years to produce forms we have never seen, adaptations we cannot predict, and perhaps, just perhaps, intelligence we do not yet recognize. The tube worms at hydrothermal vents are not intelligent. The blind shrimp are not intelligent. The Boper eels and vampire squid are not intelligent, at least not in ways we would recognize. But something could be. Something that lives deeper. Something that moves slower. Something that thinks in timescales we cannot fathom, in ways that are so alien to us that we would not recognize thought even if we encountered it. The ocean dreams, and we do not know what it dreams of. But perhaps in descending, we are stepping into that dream, becoming part of it, not as explorers, but as characters in a story that began long before we arrived and will continue long after we are gone. The abyss does not need us, but perhaps it allows us, tolerates us, watches us with something that might, in its own way, be curiosity. And perhaps that is enough, because the search for knowledge is not always about finding answers. Sometimes it is about learning to ask the right questions, learning to accept that not everything can be explained, categorized, or understood. Sometimes the mystery is the point. And in the deep, where the light does not reach and the pressure crushes steel, the mystery is everything. So we descend again and again into the cold, into the dark, into the silence. And somewhere in the depths we have not yet reached, the ocean waits, patient, eternal, unknowable. And we, fragile and fleeting, continue to wonder. Because that is what it means to be human, to seek, to explore, to push against the darkness not because we will conquer it, but because we cannot help but try. The ocean dreams in darkness, and perhaps one day it will share those dreams with us. Until then, we listen, we watch, we wait. And the abyss, as always, stares back. Thank you for drifting with us into the unknown. The ocean is the last great frontier on our own planet, closer than the stars, yet just as mysterious. It covers more than 70% of the Earth, reaches depths that crush steel, and hosts ecosystems we are only beginning to understand. And in its deepest places, where sunlight has never touched and pressure reigns supreme, there are secrets we may never fully uncover. But that will not stop us from trying. If this journey stirred something within you, a curiosity, a chill, a sense of wonder, we invite you to share your thoughts. What do you believe waits in the deepest waters? Have you heard a story, read a report, or felt a pull toward the ocean's mysteries? The comment section is yours. Let us know what you think. We are all explorers here, seeking light in the dark, and perhaps through our collective curiosity, we can piece together a little more of the puzzle, one dive at a time, one question at a time, one mystery at a time. If you enjoyed this exploration, consider liking this video and subscribing for more journeys into the unknown. We delve into the strange, the unexplained, and the edges of human understanding, always with a calm voice, a skeptical eye, and a sense of wonder that refuses to fade. Because the world is vast, the universe is vaster, and there is always more to discover. Until next time, stay curious, stay questioning, and remember, some secrets are kept not because they are hidden, but because we have not yet learned how to see. Good night, and safe travels through the deep. The ocean is listening, and perhaps one day it will answer.